I'm not going to sit here and wax poetic about Bill, other than the fact what I think what attracts me most about it. Anybody who talks about common sense resistance is someone that I want to know more about. And because sometimes I don't know if I feel this common sense resistance because as a talk show host I just want to go out there and axe-slay the people who I think are just stupid. But that doesn't necessarily help persuade. I think Bill Whittle is going to tell us more about how you can actually use logic and persuasiveness to get more people into the conservative principles. So ladies and gentlemen, speaker, he's going to tell you all about it. Bill Whittle, let's hear it.
Well, hi everybody. Hi everybody. Hi everybody. How did get used to hearing things at that speed, and after a while you start to feel like Gomer Pyle up here if you're talking any slower than that. It's great to be here in Oregon, ladies and gentlemen. I make this joke everywhere I go, gets a laugh everywhere I go, because it's so true. It's always a pleasure to come back. I just flew up from Los Angeles. I always enjoy coming back to visit the United States of America. I was born in America myself, as a matter of fact. My understanding is that you guys just got an In-N-Out in this town. Accept no further gifts from California, I'm warning you. Don't accept anything else from California. The In-N-Out is as good as it gets. I think they grind up crack cocaine and nicotine in those burgers because they're damn delicious. But it's great to be here visiting from the land of In-N-Out burgers, where you can, honest to God, get an honest to God $1,000 fine for throwing a frisbee on the beach in Santa Monica, and where they're trying to obtain human rights for broccoli. This is where I come from, and I wish I could tell you that I was kidding, but it's just awful. I live in Mordor, down there underneath the giant red eye, and I have to watch this go on every day. But people say, why don't you move someplace sensible? If you're going to be a volcanologist, you have to live under the volcano. I would also like to say, before we get started, how important it is for groups like this, because when you really get down to elections and winning and losing the country, it's all done through elections. And without a ground game, we lose. We lose on the federal, the local, state level, all of it. And having you out here doing the footwork to get these Republicans elected is really important. It's especially important because the other side cheats. They do. My dad voted Republican to the day he died. And then he started voting Democrat. And I don't like it. So, it's really important. And thank you very much for doing what you do, because I know a lot of it's out of the spotlight. There's so much to talk about out there today. Oh, by the way, I have a little stopwatch app, a little timer watch on my iPhone here. Let me know how long I'm going. I got a picture of Fidel Castro here. It keeps me out of 4.5-hour territory. What I'd like to talk to you about tonight is something that's kind of above politics, because I think, frankly, as I'm about to try to make the case, every time we talk about politics we lose, but every time we talk about morality and philosophy we win. So what I'd really like to talk about tonight is the threat that I think is really facing the country, and God knows we all see threats out there every single day of every stripe and every color. But the one thing that I am most concerned about is lawlessness on the part of our elected officials. Not worried about street crime. Street crime can be enforced. I'm worried about lawlessness on the part of our elected officials. And I mean rampant lawlessness. And I mean the kind of lawlessness that goes on so often and so commonly that nobody even sees it anymore. Nobody even sees it. It's not even on the radar. We were talking earlier before the event, and Bill was saying, it's hard to get Republicans organized because we're not joiners, because basically we want to be left alone. And the reason we want to be left alone is because we think other people should be left alone. And we have businesses to run, and families to raise, and church events to go to. And that's why we want to be left alone. And it is a tremendous, incredible disadvantage compared to the left, because the left has politics for their job and their religion and their hobby. They're like rust. They never sleep. They're at it all the time, constantly, every single day. They're working on ways to pass legislation to make people do what they want them to do. There's something wrong with them. They're missing a chromosome somewhere. They're genetic defectives who have to tell other people what to do all the time, and as long as you're happy, they're not happy. And so we have to stop these people. And it means that we have to do things that doesn't normally appeal to us, which is get involved in politics and go to fundraisers and do all this other stuff. It's absolutely essential, because Russ never sleeps. And just when you finish mowing the lawn and you win an election, you think, great, we won the election. Well, you mow the lawn on Saturday, and by Tuesday, your grass is growing again, right? It never sleeps, it never tires, and we have to understand that. And unfortunately, folks, I hate to be the guy that brings this to you, That means that we can never beat these people, but we can lose to them. We can lose to them. We can lose our civil rights. We can lose our property rights. We can lose our freedom. They can take it away. They're working on it all the time. And we can never beat them because they never, ever sleep and they never, ever rest. But we can stop them. We just have to do it every day. That's our job. Our job is to roll that rock up the hill. Their job is to push it down. Who do you think's got the easier job? Democrats are trying to give away free candy. Republicans are trying to sell vegetables. It's just that simple. You can make the case all you want to that vegetables are better for you, but it's a lot easier to give away free candy than it is to sell vegetables. And I'm talking to you, Bernie Sanders. I'm talking right to you. You ought to know better. You're old enough to know better. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to mention, too. We had a great afternoon event with a lot of the young Republicans out there. We saw some of them earlier. He's absolutely right. It does lower the average age in here. You know, I've done Republican Party events and Tea Party events, and I look out and the average age is, you know, deceased. But there's a reason for that. And there is a reason, in fact, why Republicans trend older than Democrats, why conservatives are older than liberals. And the reason is it takes quite a while for life to beat the stupid out of you. That's why. It takes quite a long time for life to beat the stupid out of you. And by the time you're old enough, if you're going to learn the lesson, you learn it, and you join the forces of light and not the forces of darkness, and you realize that there's nothing free. That everything they talk about giving you is free, none of it's free. And this is the part of the thing that I actually think I have some skill with, because I'm a screenwriter and I deal with language and I deal with messaging and I deal with optics and I deal with storytelling. It's all about storytelling. We talk about the lawlessness. I mean, obviously, I don't have the same level of detail that you do, but we just had a situation here with the Bureau of Land Management and all of this stuff that happened that went on out there. And it's a good example because, you know, it's something like 78% of Nevada, or 80-something, 83%, 87% of the state of Nevada is owned by the federal government. I don't know what the percentage is here, but California, 52? Half of the state is owned by the federal government. This is what I want to talk about. Obama just came down to California and with a wave of his hand granted, I don't remember if it was 20 million acres, something like that. He just granted it to the federal government. I grant you, unto you, I grant you 20 million acres that don't belong to the people anymore. They don't belong to the people that were out there having fun on ATVs. Doesn't belong to anybody anymore. He just simply waved his hand and he did it. He waved his hand and he renames mountains. He's a king who walks the earth. I don't like the name of that mountain anymore. I've decided to change it. We're going to call it Denali now. We're going to do all of these things. It's lawlessness. It's tyranny. It's dictatorship. If the president can dictate the terms of a law, what do you call a system where the leader can do that? It's called a dictatorship. And when I talk about lawlessness, I'm talking about things that should caused our ancestors certainly, to get up with pitchforks and fires and knives and guns, and we don't do anything. For example, he passes Obamacare. He rammed it through the Congress, and we had to pass it so we know what was in it. It was literally 18 feet high. Absolutely meant to be unintelligible. Meant to be unintelligible. Intended so that nobody could understand it. Nancy Pelosi says we have to pass it so we can find out what's in it. Isn't that convenient? Turns out there's student loan funding in it and all kinds of other things. Right? It's lawlessness. And when the president of the United States is shoving this gigantic bill down the throats of the American people with not a single Republican vote, not one, and then it turns out that the $950 million that he spent on one website, I'd love to tell you I was making it up. The Obamacare website was you can get it done for probably 15 grand if you know somebody pretty good. They spent $950 million on this website and the shopping cart didn't work. The shopping cart didn't work. That's why we don't want the government health care, because they spend $950 million to make a website where the shopping cart doesn't work. If they can't make a website where the shopping cart works, these are not the people I want operating on my sister's heart and lungs, frankly. They're just not those kind of people. I want people that can do the job competently. So my point about lawlessness and how easily we accept it is that he passed this law. It was set to take place at a certain date. Let's say it was July of 2011 or 12 or whatever. Some date where something was supposed to be implemented. Implicated's a better word. And they weren't ready. And so the president comes out on the press and says, I've decided to extend this date by 6 months. We all just heard him do it. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. The legislation was passed by Congress. It was signed by the president. If you want to change the implication rate or dates of this thing, you have to pass new legislation saying that this bill has been delayed. And that has to pass too. And if it doesn't pass, then it has to do what the original legislation said. And he just said, oh, we're going to knock it back 6 months. And everybody said, okay. Yeah, okay. All right. Really? It's amazing. It's amazing what they get away with this magical cloak of invisibility that this press throws over the Democrats. They used to be a free press in this country, and now it's simply the audiovisual department of the Democratic Party. That's all it is. They simply throw a cloak of invisibility over it, and nobody says boo. Look, we talk about these things, and they're very simple, and they're in the Constitution, and we've let them go, and I don't mean let them go for 8 years. We've let them go for 80 years. We've let them go for probably 180 years. We've let them go. For example, in the Constitution, it says what federal lands the federal government can own. It's very clear. It's very clear. It says that they can own territories, but territories have to be turned into states. There are no more territories in the continental U.S. They're all states now. They can't own any of that stuff. It says they can also own enclosures, which is kind of abbreviated as forts and ports. They can own land in a state for a fort, for a military installation. They can own land for a naval base. Forts and ports are allowed. And then special use. You telling me 87% of the state of Nevada is special use? It's against the law. It's against the law. It's against the law. And they've been doing it. And they say, well, the Supreme Court has ruled for 3 years of their 75 decisions. The Supreme Court said this, 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 and this, and this. Let me tell you something else they do that's lawless, and it's a great example of them backing up their lawlessness with the Supreme Court. It's the most important thing, really, there is. If you talk to people during the passage of Obamacare, for example, you would talk to some senator from Michigan, some Democratic senator who's voting for this. And they literally did this on camera. Somebody went up to one of these guys on camera and said, well, where do you get the constitutional authority to pass this legislation? And the guy looked at him like he was from Mars. What do you mean? Where do you get your authority? Where do you get your legal authority? Where in the Constitution does it say that you can force the American people to buy something they don't want to buy? Where in the Constitution, you're a federal representative, show me where it says you have the power to force people to buy something they don't want to buy. Most of them couldn't answer. So they had to assemble their little team of sophists and all these other people, and they said what they always say. What they always say. They said it's in the Commerce Clause. It's in the Commerce Clause of the Constitution. It's authorized by the Commerce Clause of the Constitution. Well, whose fault is this, folks? It's our fault. I was 53 years old before I read the Commerce Clause to our Constitution. I was 53 years old before I read this law that has allowed these people, Democrats and Republicans, to steal all of this power. So let me just tell you what the Commerce Clause says, and let me tell you why these progressives get away with what they get away with. The Commerce Clause says that Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce among the United States. But it doesn't stop there, unfortunately. It actually says Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce among the United States, the Indian tribes, and foreign powers. Those three. Among the United States, the Indian tribes, and foreign powers. It doesn't say Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce among the United States. It says among the United States, the Indian tribes, and foreign powers. Why is that important? Well, it's important because the founders of the Constitution, when they were making this operator's manual for the country, were crystal clear. They didn't have 14,000 pages that reached 28 feet into the air. The Constitution, as P.G. O'Rourke pointed out, the U.S. Constitution is shorter than the owner's manual for a 1995 Toyota Camry. It's shorter, and it needs to be, because it needs to be understood by the people of the country who agree to be governed by these laws. So, when they claim the Commerce Clause allows them to regulate commerce among the states, what they claim is it means they get to be involved with all of your business, with all of your commerce. But the Constitution divides power among three ways. That's all it does. The Constitution is there to divide power among three different organisms. The federal government, called the United States, the states, like Oregon, and the people. And they're never referred to in any other terms. The U.S., the United States, that's the federal government, the states or the people. The United States, the states, or the people. The United States, the states, or the people. Now, when the Commerce Clause says that Congress shall have the power to regulate, it means the power to make even. It doesn't mean the power to control. It doesn't mean the power to tell. It means make even. That's what regulate means. Congress shall have the power to make even commerce between the states, foreign powers, and the Indian tribes. So, unless you're a state, or you're a foreign power, or you're an Indian tribe, they've got no business telling you how to do anything at all, period. None. None. Because if what they had wanted, if what these people say, if the people use the Commerce Clause as a defense of all of this power that they want, if the Commerce Clause had said what they think it said, the Commerce Clause would read, Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce among the people. But it doesn't say that at all. The people aren't even mentioned in this. What the Commerce Clause means is that Michigan can't make a deal with another country that Alabama can't make. They have to be regulated. They have to be equal. It's talking about the states. So this giant power grab for Obamacare and all the rest is simply illegal. And whose fault is this? It's our fault. When the founders were asked what kind of enforcement there would be for these kind of things, they said, well, the enforcement will be the people. The people will have read their own constitution, they'll know their own constitution, and if somebody tries to steal this kind of power, they're going to rise up as one and throw these bums right out of office. That's why we cycle Congress every 2 years in the House of Representatives. But we don't read the Constitution. It's not our problem. You know, somebody else is reading it. Lawyers are reading it. And when you question people about the Commerce Clause, they will tell you, well, there's been 5 Supreme Court rulings, 5 of them, that said that Congress does have the power to regulate commerce and tell you what you can or cannot buy. Well, you know what? The Supreme Court is wrong. And if they ruled on it 5 times, they've been wrong 5 times. Well, who are you, Bill Whittle? Are you some kind of constitutional authority? Are you a constitutional law student? Did you graduate from Harvard Law like the president? No. I'm a college dropout. But I can read an English sentence, and you can't. You can't. Because I can read English, and you can't. And I don't want the power, and you do. So if the Supreme Court ruled that Congress has the power, the Supreme Court is wrong. We're not ruled by a court. We're ruled by the document. The document's clear. It's in English. It was meant to be in English that anybody could understand. You know, the great unsung hero of the Constitution, we talk about Madison, we talk about Jefferson with the Declaration and Hamilton and all these guys. The great unsung hero was a guy named Gouverneur Morris. And he was in charge of the Committee on Style. And his job, among the other people of the Committee on Style, was to take this very sophisticated, in some cases very arcane kind of mechanical stuff and boil it down into language that everybody could understand. Farmers out at their plows could understand it, because if they couldn't understand it, then it couldn't be a law, right? If the people who are going to have to live under that law cannot understand the law, then it's not a republic. It's just an oligarchy. It's a kingdom. So they made sure in the Constitution that everybody could understand a plain English sentence like the Commerce Clause. So how do they get away with this? They get away with it because we let them get away with it. They get away with it because, well, attorneys have said this, and lawyers have said this, and this Harvard law professor says this. I don't care. You can't read English. I can read the English. There's a full stop here. There's a period here. No. It's the same thing with the Bureau of Land Management. They own 1/4 of the country. Are you telling me that the founders of this country, who simply said, no, we're going to have the federal government, and we're going to have the states, and we're going to have the people, and any powers not reserved to the federal government are withheld to the states or the people? They didn't intend this. They own 1/4 of the country. Why? Because we let them. It's a lot of money in that kind of territory. Maybe they should sell it, and they could pay off their debts for the bills that they can't pay on their own. It's just a thought. Those lands can go back to the states or to the people, but they've got no legal right to keep them as the federal government. And we just allow it. So this is how we get into this kind of trouble. Now, when you get down to it, there were really just 2 things that really happened that really allowed these people to steal this kind of power. Because as I was saying to the younger people earlier today, everything that's been happening since the beginning of the last century, since the beginning of the 1900s, has been a ratchet. You all know what a ratchet is, right? When you ratchet a boat up from a lake and you got your little trailer, and people can, one guy, even a strikingly handsome guy like me can ratchet a giant boat out of the water because of the ratchet. So it means that all I have to do is just move the lever just a little bit, and then something locks and it doesn't go back. And then I push a little more and it locks and it never goes back. It only goes one way. It only goes one way. It never goes the other way. And all of these laws and all of these power grabs have all been going the same way with this ratchet. And the ratchet takes all of these policies from the conservative to the liberal. It always ratchets from the right to the left. It always ratchets from the people and the states up to the federal government. And it always ratchets from the rural populations to the urban populations. It always moves in those directions, always. Because these people have to tell other people what to do. And if you're all running around doing your own thing, how are we going to control you? If we can get control of one government that controls all of you, that's awesome. It's harder to take control of 50 governments that control all of you, and it's much harder to get control of 3,000 local governments that control all of you. But if all the power's in the federal government, all we have to do is win in the cities, and we get to tell everybody what to do. And that's why these laws work the way they do. So, the catastrophic things that happened to this country were the progressive amendments to the Constitution that happened in the early 1900s. The Constitution as written with the Bill of Rights was essentially perfect, but there were two amendments that utterly destroyed this balance of power between these power-hungry lunatics in Washington versus the power-hungry lunatics in the state houses. You see, that's the point, right? It's not that the people in the states are more noble than the people that go to Washington. The genius of the Constitution is to assume that anybody who wants power is automatically probably a rotten bastard. And so, how do we keep these people fighting each other? So these two amendments, which may not seem to make much sense, actually were just terrible, terrible for the country. The 16th Amendment introduced the income tax, which gave the federal government enormous sources of revenue. Enormous sources of revenue. Started out small, 1%, 2%. We'll tax the rich higher, though, 6% for them, right? But it's just low, and this money came straight to the federal government. But the catastrophe was the 17th Amendment. Anybody out there know what the 17th Amendment did? I'll bet you it's not 1 in 20 people in here. Okay, some of us do. I guarantee you, out on college campuses, not 1 in 1,000 could tell you what the 17th Amendment did. So let me just tell you one moment, because this is really, really important. The 17th Amendment changed the way that we elect senators. Formerly, the way the Constitution was written, senators were sent to Washington by the legislatures of the individual states. But the 17th Amendment, and this is how progressives and the left always works, is that's not very democratic, isn't it? Wouldn't it be nicer and wouldn't it be better if we just had the people of Oregon to elect the senators of Oregon directly and send them to Washington? Wouldn't that be fairer and better? No, it wouldn't. But they sold it that way. And so people think, well, okay, so we've got two people that we elect as senators going to Washington from Oregon, and they represent the people of Oregon. But they're not supposed to represent the people of Oregon. That's what the representatives of Oregon are there for. The two senators from Oregon are supposed to represent the state of Oregon. Not the people of Oregon, the state of Oregon. And when the states were sending senators to the Senate to look out for the interest of the state, the federal government couldn't pull this kind of nonsense like 85% ownership of the state of Nevada, because the senators of Nevada are not interested in what the people of Nevada think. That's what the representatives of Nevada are for. They're there to protect the interests of the state of Nevada, and they would have said no. But they're not representing the state anymore. They're representing the people, usually the people from the cities. So basically, the Senate has become useless. It's kind of a House of Lords now. It's an upper chamber where if you're richer or a little better funded, you get to spend a little more time on the company dime, but it doesn't do anything that the House doesn't do. It used to protect the power of the states, and now it doesn't do that at all. It's a catastrophe, because the states are the only thing powerful enough to stop this federal power grab, which has been going on all the time. It's been going on for 100 years. So we got some real problems out there. We do. We got some really big problems. And I think that the biggest problem right now in Washington, and in the states as well, but mostly in Washington, you talk about, well, we're going to get a new Congress in there. That hasn't worked out so well as far as I've been concerned. I've seen the Republicans flip the Congress, 6 years ago? They flipped the Senate 2 years ago. And I haven't seen them stopping this president's ability to just go around, wave his hand, and rename mountains and extend laws. Why haven't they done it? Why is it that everybody in here feels like we were sold out by the fact that we flipped the House? The first time after Obama was elected, the next thing that happened was a huge flip in the House of Representatives because the American people said, it's not what we wanted. Took over the House in 2010, took over the Senate in 2014. Why aren't we stopping them? One of the reasons we're not stopping is because nobody wants to be called a racist, right? It's just that simple. Let's just say what it is. Why don't you say something? Well, I don't want to criticize President Obama. Why not? Well, because I don't want to. Is it because he's black? Is that why you don't want to criticize him? Because it doesn't stop me. People say, well, you're a racist for criticizing Obama. I said, no. On the contrary, I don't hate him because he's black. I hate him because he's red. That's why. That's why I can't stand the guy, right? Actually, as a matter of fact, the fact that he's black is about the only thing I like about the guy. It's about the only thing I genuinely like about the guy. I think it was a good thing for the country to have a black president. I just wish it could have been a better man than this imposter who grew up on the beach in Hawaii smoking doobies, going to the richest public school in America, and telling us he's part of the struggle. Please, please. You went to the richest school in America. You sat there. You had doors open for you everywhere you go. You don't get to claim you're part of the struggle. No way. I'd rather have Jesse Jackson as president because at least he grew up in the South and he can at least make the claim. Right? So we put up with it because we don't want to be called racist. And we put up with it because of the immortal, there's one element of the United States government that's immortal. It's immortal. It can't be killed. You can rotate congressmen every 2 years. You can rotate senators every 6. You can rotate a governor every 4. You can rotate the president every 4. But right now in Washington, there is an immortal group of people that actually run the country, and it's the bureaucracy. They never die, they never leave, and they never go away. It's immortal. It's like a cancer cell. It just keeps growing, doesn't matter, it just keeps growing. Let's just take a couple of quick examples. I wanted to be a fighter pilot when I was a kid, and I wanted to be a fighter pilot, and I started working at the Miami Planetarium when I was 14 because I was going to go join the Air Force. I was going to shoot down communists at supersonic speeds, and then I was going to command a mission to Mars. Somebody had to do it, and it was going to be me. I watched them land on the moon. I was 10 years old. I was in the Plaza Hotel overlooking New York Central Park when Neil Armstrong put his foot down, and I said, yeah, about the time I'm 21, 22, perfect. We'll have all the rockets ready to go. Let's get on with it. But it didn't work out that way. Right? It didn't work out that way. So, we look at the situation, we ask ourselves, what's going on? Why is this bureaucracy immortal? And the reason I brought up the story about going to Mars is, when I was a kid growing up during the Apollo era, I had a tattoo of NASA on the inside of my skin. It was under my skin. I had a tattoo directly on my heart. I thought NASA was the greatest thing this country had ever done, ever. And it put us on the moon. It was remarkable, absolutely amazing. But that NASA was consisting of test pilots, astronauts, engineers, program managers, businessmen from Lockheed and from Boeing and from North American Rockwell, Grumman, Honeywell, Teledyne, all these guys, all working together to get us on the moon. Now, NASA's just a standing army of people that go out and tell Muslim nations about all the scientific contributions that they've made. And the reason I say it's an immortal bureaucracy is because in real dollars, in 2012 dollars, NASA's budget in 2006 was $14 billion. NASA's budget last year was also $14 billion. You know what the difference between NASA in 2006 and the NASA of last year is? In 2006, NASA was flying men into space. They haven't been doing that for 2 years. The space shuttle program was retired. We can't get to space now. If we have to put Americans into space today, we have to beg a ride off the Russians. And that's the truth for the foreseeable future, and the only hope is a private businessman like SpaceX and Elon Musk. But we can't get to our own space station now because we do not have a rocket launch system. But we're spending as much money as we spent when we were flying 4 space shuttles 6 times a year. Explain this to me. Explain it to me. The Environmental Protection Agency, which was never a constitutional agency, however, let's just be fair about this. When the EPA was inaugurated in the 1970s, the river that ran through the middle of Cleveland, Ohio, was on fire. It caught fire. Dennis Kucinich was mayor at the time. It caught fire. There was not a fish alive in the Great Lakes anywhere. When jets would take off from airports, they'd leave black smudges in the air, and if you're old enough to remember waiting in traffic, you would see little puffs of blue smoke coming out of the exhaust pipe of every single car on there. The air in Los Angeles now is much, much, much cleaner than it was 25, 30 years ago. We don't have smog days like that anymore. We have occasionally hazy days, but when I got there in 1988, in the summer, I was working at an office in Beverly Hills for 3 weeks until it cleared out for me to go, my God, we're in a valley. It's a valley. There's mountains out there. So the EPA pulling mercury out of the rivers is good, and the EPA cleaning up the air is good, and the EPA cleaning up the water is good, and it took them two decades, maybe 3, to get it done, and they did it. Now what? Well, we can't just say, hey, mission accomplished, let's go home. because that's not how bureaucracies work. They're immortal. They can't get smaller, and they can't spend less money. So the organization, which once had to clean mercury out of waters, now walks around and makes sure that every time you try to open a dry cleaning store, you've got a little, corner 7-Eleven you want to open, we've got to do $14,000 worth of a site survey to make sure that there's no Indian arrowheads there, and we can't irrigate the Central Valley of California because there's a fish called the Delta smelt and it's endangered. And therefore, you're going to have to shut down the entire agriculture of California, which was the breadbasket of the world, to save this little fish. And my response is, well, about the Delta smelt, let me ask you a question. Is it delicious? Because if it's delicious, we'll have 100 billion of them in no time whatsoever. We'll put them on pizzas. But no, because it's not about protecting the Delta smelt, and it's not about protecting the wildlife, and it's not about protecting any of this stuff. It's about shutting down businesses, and it's about taking control away from your business and sending it to Washington. And I don't have to tell those of you here in Oregon to say it's gotten much worse than that. It's not just a question of what you can do with your business now. The EPA tells you what you can do on your own property now. I saw a story just yesterday that an Oregon man is going to jail because he had the temerity to reclaim rainwater on his own property. He had 3 big vats, and he's going to jail because he kept the rainwater that landed on his own roof. Seriously? You know, when I was talking to the young people today, I talk about changing the messaging, and I said, you know, we talk about the Tea Party, and when you tell young people about the Tea Party, they think, oh, it's what is it, little old ladies sitting around together, and they haven't been taught any history about this country. They don't know anything about it. They're purposely not taught about it. And I would say to these young people, no, the Tea Party was this. The Boston Tea Party, here's what happened. There were a bunch of guys who got liquored up. They were fraternity guys. They got liquored up because they got really angry because all of a sudden they were paying for Wi-Fi that yesterday was free. They come to their Starbucks, and now their Starbucks is charging them $4.50 for Wi-Fi. It's been free the whole time. They got all liquored up and just trashed the joint. They just trashed it. And they go, oh yeah, I'd trash it too. They put a cent tax on tea that wasn't there before, and they didn't have anything to say about it. They didn't have any voice in it, so they trashed the place. That's who we're descended from. It's awesome. It's awesome. You work for us. We don't work for you. You work for us. See how it works? So, we have this giant, endless bureaucracy. And in the old days, when somebody was elected, again, let's just say you became a senator from Oregon and you went to Washington, and let's say you were a dry goods guy. You had a dry goods store. I don't know what dry goods are, but apparently there were a lot of them in the last century. So you made $1 million selling dry goods, and you get elected yourself to the state legislature of Oregon, elects you senator, and you go to Washington to protect the interests of the state of Oregon. But what used to happen, and what doesn't happen anymore, is the guy that ran that the dry goods store would take his business manager with him, he'd take his secretary with him, he'd take his office manager from the other plant with him, and they would go with him, and that would be his new staff. And he would go to the people who he's been replaced, and he said, so long now, see ya, you're out of here. These people are going to exercise my voice now, because I'm elected by the people of Oregon, and you're not. And I've talked to people like Ted Cruz, and I got to be pretty good friends with Alan West, and Alan West said the second you get to Washington, the instant that you get there, they start having these meetings, and the first thing they tell you is, Alan West will say, well, here's what I want to accomplish in my first 2 years. And they'll say, well, they'll nod, and they'll say, wonderful. But you know what, Mr. West, we don't really do things like that here. And all of these freshmen get there, and they're told how things are done in Washington. And they just nod. Okay. That's not how we do things here. Here's what actually happens. You have to do this, 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 and this. I talked to a guy who was a state senator in Arizona, and he handed off bills to his aides for them to put into the language to put into the bill. And when he looked at the bill as it was presented on the floor, the language was not only different, it was inverted. It did the opposite of what the bill was intended to do. That writing was done by the staff of that particular senator from Arizona who didn't like it, and they just changed it because they figured nobody'd catch him. Wow. See, if it were me, and I were sent as a representative from the state of Oregon, and I'm at the first meeting in the United States Congress, and somebody says, I'm going to say, here's what we're going to do. First thing we're going to do is give the people of Oregon their property back. And somebody says to me, who's the assistant associate headmaster of whatever school they happen to be in or whatever, says, Mr. Whittle, we're really glad to have you. We're really excited. But that's not how things are done around here. My response would be, first of all, you're fired. You're fired right now. Just the fact that you said that, you're fired. That's number one. Number two, the reason you're fired is because I represent the people of Oregon and you don't. So get out of here. You don't get to tell me what to do for my people back home. I'm here to tell you what we're going to do for our people back home. But they don't. So how do we stop it? Well, it's actually a little easier than we thought. I want to spend too much time up here, but really it comes down to what I was talking about earlier, which is the messaging. Look, we understand how the country's founded. We understand how it works. I go to Tea Party events, and I see some of the things I see here. Sometimes I go to Tea Party events, I'll see a Gadsden flag, maybe somebody will be dressed up as George Washington and Benjamin Franklin, and you see the Constitution in the back, and there's all the parchments and the quills, and everything's written, we the people, and all this other stuff. But if you tell young people that this is their future, they look at you and they laugh. And you know, to be honest with you, you can't really blame them. They've never been told the history. I like the Tea Party guys because they were a bunch of frat boys who got liquored up because they got charged for something that they weren't paying for before. But they're not portrayed that way. They were racists who dressed up as Indians and they just decided to crash this part down. So I had this young girl say to me once, I want to start a Tea Party group in my high school, what should I do? And I said, well, for God's sakes, don't call it a Tea Party. Put up a poster, take the logo out of Star Wars, put up a poster that says that at 2 o'clock today in room 229 will be the first meeting of the Rebel Alliance. Put that up on the wall and walk away. And she started smiling. For those of you that don't know, the Rebel Alliance is a Star Wars term. They're the good guys in Star Wars. It's the big evil empire, and it's the Rebel Alliance. And she said, what do I do when people ask me, well, what is this Rebel Alliance? Look them right in the eye and say, I don't think this is for you. And turn around and go. Watch what happens then. Because people don't want to be told that they're not good enough to join something. They'll ask you some more questions. Tell them, look, we're outnumbered on a good day, we're outnumbered 100 to 1, okay? Usually it's 1,000 to 1, 10,000 to 1. And in order to be a member of the Rebel Alliance, you have to be smart. You have to understand history and economics. You can't just be an idiot. You have to have 60 years of Jedi training to get into these X-Wing fighters. We've only got 6 of them, and we're going to go up there and fly through wave after wave after wave of Imperial TIE fighters, roll into that Death Star trench, avoid the laser blast, pop off a couple of photon bombs, get the hell out of there before that giant Death Star blows up and turns all of this into waste. And we're sitting around eating rats over burning sticks, over burning tires in the street, because that's what's going to happen if we don't get this debt under control. And they say, well, how do I join this thing? Because we are the rebels. Of course we're the rebels. We believe in freedom, right? We believe in freedom. We believe in freedom. We believe in fast cars, loud guns, hot women. How hard is this to sell, honestly? Really. And all of these liberals in Hollywood, all of these D-bags running around talking about, oh, I'm against guns. Really, Matt Damon? I've never seen you in a movie where you didn't have a gun in your hand. And every single movie that gets made by these liberals is a conservative movie. You know why? Because James Bond does not go out on a mission armed only with a sternly worded letter from the United Nations, and he doesn't drive off in a Prius at a reasonable speed. That's how it doesn't work. So, we got to beat these people using these kind of messages, and it's simple. For example, we're talking now about this business of you can't collect rainwater on your own property. Really? I'll tell you what, ma'am, you're not allowed to wear a red hat. Yes, I'm sorry, I don't mean to single you out, but from now on you're not allowed to wear red. Your proper response to me telling you that would be, well, who the hell are you to tell me what I can wear? Okay, excellent. Excellent. Why? Why can't I tell you? Why can't I tell you that you don't get to wear a red hat? Don't you love the planet? Good. I don't get to tell you that you can't wear a red hat. You know why? Because it's none of my damn business what you do with your own property. That's why. And when you start talking to young people and start saying to them, hey, you're not allowed to wear that kind of t-shirt, you're not allowed to wear that color. I don't like pink. Well, pink's my favorite color. I'm sorry, no more pink. Who the hell are you to tell me that I can't wear pink? Who the hell are you to tell me that I can't collect rainwater on my own property in my own house? Let's make up which side of this issue we want to be on. Do we want to be left alone, yes or no? Or do we want everybody else to tell us what to do, yes or no? And all of a sudden they start listening to you when they didn't listen to you before. Because the big miracle about young people is this. They've been told their entire lives that they're socialists, and they've been raised by people who are socialists, but they're not socialists. They are rock-ribbed capitalists, young people in America. And all you have to do is point it out to them by showing them what they do. There's a couple of great examples of this, and my favorite one, well, there's 3. I I tell the story everywhere I go. Some of my fans out there probably be able to recite it by heart with me up here, almost like a chant or something. But honestly, a couple years ago I went to Oberlin College. It's the most liberal college in America, and as I like to say, Oberlin is where reason and logic go to die. And I was in a room full of people, and there was giant, stadium seating, and the Republican Party of Oberlin had 3 members, and the president, 4 months before the election of 2012, hadn't decided who he was going to vote for yet. No kidding, that's the truth. But there's just a bunch of people up there, and they're sneering, and they're guffawing, and they're rolling their eyes. I'm down here doing my dog and pony show. And after it's over, like tonight, we'll do a Q&A. And I said to them, how many of you out there consider yourself to be socialists? And at Oberlin, it was about 7 out of 10 of these kids raised their hands. And I said, okay, socialists, what kind of phone do you have? I got an iPhone 5. What do you got? Well, what do you want to know? Just curious. What kind of phones do you have? They got iPhones, and they got Droids, and they got Galaxies and stuff. I said, okay, socialists, just you socialists, why don't you bring your iPhones down to the front now? Why do you want our phones? Don't worry, I'm not a Democrat. I'm not going to steal them from you. But what is the core belief of socialism? What's the core moral stand of socialism? You claim to be socialists. You claim to be caring. You claim to be better people than we are and smarter than we are. So what is it that socialism is about? Put it in a sentence. And I'm sitting here, it's like, it's not really my job to argue your side of the argument for you, but I got a little free time, so I'll do it anyway. Isn't the essence of socialism from each according to his ability to each according to his need? Isn't that what Bernie Sanders is saying? We're going to take all the money from those rich people and we're going to give it to students so that you can get a free college education. We're going to take from each according to their ability and we're going to give to each according to his need. That was Marx's statement. That's what the socialists in the Soviet Union believed. And there you go. Isn't that it? Yeah, that's it. We like that. Okay. Bring down your phones. Because we're going to put them in a box here. And when I'm finished tonight, we're going to take that box to downtown Cleveland and we're going to find a pawn shop. There's easily $2,000 worth of electronics up there, and we're going to take those $2,000 worth of phones and we're going to go to a pawn shop. We're going to get $120 bills, and we're going to go through the streets of Cleveland. We're going to distribute $20 bills to the homeless people of Cleveland. So bring them down, from each according to their ability to each according to their need. Bring them down, and they don't bring them down. You know why? Because they're rock-ribbed capitalists. That's why. They're William F. Buckley. When it comes time to, they're all about wealth redistribution as long as it's somebody else's wealth being redistributed to them. But when it's time for their wealth to go to somebody else, no. And normally I'm a nice guy, as you can see. I'm obviously a charming fellow, but I decided to give him a hard time. I said, listen, all of you out there, there's not one of you in this room right now, I know it. There's not one of you here that does not have a game console. You've got an Xbox 360, you've got a PlayStation 2, or Wii something. Every single one of you has a game console that's worth $300 or $400, and the games are $60, $70 each. So you have at least right now in your dorms right now, you have at least $500 worth of toys. Now, if you were to take that down and sell it and pawn it, that $500 could feed a family in Africa for 1 year. An actual family of real people could survive for 1 year on the price of your toy. You want to talk about need? The poorest Americans are richer than 93% of the rest of the people on this earth because of capitalism, and you have your capitalist toys, but you claim you're socialists who believe from each according to their ability to each according to their needs. Live up to what you say, cash the toys in, and send the money where it's more needed. And they don't do it. And they'll say things like, this is my phone. And I'll say, I agree. Technically it's your dad's phone, but let's not split hairs over this. And you confront them with the fact that they may talk about being socialist, but their behavior is capitalist. I got 2 more quick examples for you. One of them was pretty simple. There was a guy who said, okay, look, you're making some good points. However, you can't possibly defend the idea that somebody could be rich enough to have 5 houses, right? There are people who don't have any houses at all. The idea that a guy's got 5 houses, some billionaire has 5 houses, is disgusting. There's no way to defend that. It's indefensible. And I just said to the guy, you got an iPhone, right? Yeah. How many songs do you have on it? Why do you want to? I'm just curious, man. So he checks his iPhone, these things are music players, and he says, I don't know, I got 750 songs, I guess. 750 songs? Do you really need 750 songs? Do you listen to 750 songs every day? Couldn't you just get by on 50 songs? Every one of those songs is about $1 each to download. That means you spent $700 on music that you didn't need for your own personal use while people are starving in the streets of this country and going without college educations. And you took $700 to download into 750 songs? I'm kind of ashamed to be seen in the same room as you. And they're stuck. They're stuck. because they make the exact same decision as those billionaires do for the exact same reason. They spend their own money on what they want for themselves. And if they wanted to take that money and donate it, that's fine, but they don't have to. And I say to these people, I don't want to live in a world, and you don't want to live in a world where a guy like me who you've never met before can tell you how many songs you can have on your iPhone. You don't want to live in that world, and I don't either. It's your business, none of my business, right? And this is how you have to convince these young kids about the dangers of this socialism thing. And finally, I was coming down to LAX yesterday, and I was using an app called Uber. Now, I found out earlier that Uber is not as popular in Medford. It's not quite hit critical mass yet. But it will. But it will. So let me tell you something. Let me just explain to you what Uber is, okay? This is the end of the Democratic Party, and this is the end of the federal power grab right here. I'm holding it in my hands. I can stand here right now, and I can order steel from China, and I don't have to go through the government or anybody else to do it. If I have the money, it's taken out of my account, it shows up, they ship it FedEx or whatever they do, and I get it. This is the end of them, because this allows me to deal directly with people, not have to go through them. But one of the apps, look, young people down in California anyway, they're not going to fight and die for this country. The only two things they'll fight and die for is Starbucks and Uber, and their Wi-Fi, so that they can sit around and talk about how evil capitalism is as they type on their iPhone sitting in Starbucks using AT&T phone lines. So, Uber is very simple. Basically, there's a little app on this phone, and when I'm in Los Angeles, I just touch it. And the phone knows where I am. I may not know where I am, but my phone always knows where I am. And my phone knows where it is, and it sends a signal out, and there are individual private citizens. This is the genius of Uber. Uber didn't say we have to buy 100,000 cars to drive people around. Uber said, wait, there's people out there with cars of their own doing absolutely nothing. So what this does, what Uber does, is it allows my phone to send a signal out, and Uber does a pretty quick and thorough background check on individual private citizens who have their own individual private cars. And what the phone says is, hey, I'm looking for a ride. And in Los Angeles, there's 6 or 7 people within 2 minutes of me, and the signal goes out, and the first one who jumps on it gets it. And he's going to take me down to the airport in his car for about a quarter of what a cab would cost me, and he's there in 2 to 3 minutes, and I get to see the car moving on the street grid. When he makes a wrong turn and misses my house, I can say, hey, you missed the house. Okay? And kids love it, and they should love it, because this is democracy, and this is capitalism. And if we don't make this election about Uber, we don't deserve to win, because these young people love Uber. They love it because it's cheap, it's fast, it makes more sense than driving economically if you live in the city, actually, and they fight and die for Uber. But why should we be making this election about Uber? Because what Uber allows us to happen is, Uber allows me to say, I need a ride, you got a car. Why don't I give you some money and you can take me where I want to go? Boom. The whole country should run like this. The whole country should run exactly like this. You got some wood, I need an extension, here you go. Why do we have to get the government involved? Why do we have to get the federal? Why do we need these licensing bureaus? Why do we need all this stuff involved? I got a buck or two, you got a car, I need to go someplace, done. And when you tell young people that Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders are against Uber, they don't believe you. They simply will not believe you. You have to cite it to them. You have to show them a link on one of these things to prove it to them. Why do Bernie and Hillary hate Uber? Even though Bernie uses Uber, much like everything else Bernie does, he says one thing about how bad it is to be rich, but he's auditioning for a job where you travel in the most expensive private jet in the world, okay, which he could never afford. This guy who's never done a day's work in his life wants to be president of the United States. He uses Uber, but he's against Uber politically, and so is Hillary. Why? Because they're Democrats, and Democrats are in the pockets of the unions. And when you tell young people what the unions want to do to Uber, all of a sudden you have their undivided attention. 2 examples of what the Democrats want to do to Uber and everything else. In Los Angeles, you can be dropped off at the airport by Uber because they can't tell who you are, you just get out of a car, but they can stop you from being picked up at the airport by Uber. And for most of the time that Uber's been around, LAX was blocked off. It simply wouldn't show any cars. You had to get out of the airport boundary before it would work. Okay? So, all of these people were coming down and leaving the airport, walking off the airport to get an Uber to go home. And finally, the LAX commission, the airport commission through the city said, I'll tell you what, Uber, we'll let you pick up people at the airport. We'll give you permission because we legally control the airport. We'll give you permission to pick people up, but you have to add $8 to the charge, and that $8 goes directly to us. And Uber said, no, I don't think so. I don't think so. Good for them. Because they got it anyway, because of public demand. And so when you tell young people look, this ride would have been what, $7 otherwise, now it's going to be $15 because of this $8 that doesn't go to the driver, it doesn't go to Uber, and it certainly comes out of your pocket, they'll say, well, where does it go? It goes to the state government so that they can pay $200,000 retirements for people that were the Assistant Deputy Undersecretary for Water for Fresno, California, so that they can retire on $200,000 a year for the rest of their lives. That's where that $8 went. And they start getting angry. And then you can tell them something else that the state Democrats did about Uber. And that is there was a protest outside of one of the state houses, I forget which one, but it was a protest against Uber by union cab drivers. And listen to what they wanted. These union cab drivers wanted the software changed. What the union cab drivers said was, we can't compete with this, so we want a law written that makes it law that says the second I hit that button for an Uber driver, it goes out to all the Uber drivers, somebody picks up the job, so far so good, but now we want a law that says that that guy's phone starts a 5-minute countdown and he doesn't get my address until the 5 minutes have expired. Why the hell do you want that? Well, because they pick people up too fast. We cab companies can't compete with that, so we have to artificially put a 5-minute delay into their pickup so that we can have a chance to compete with them. You tell young people that, they lose their minds. They lose their minds, and they should lose their minds. We can't compete with that, then you don't deserve to be here, right? If they're providing a better service at lower cost, they win and you lose. But the Democrats are not about this, because the Democrats don't get a cut. They don't get their cut. They don't get the money that goes to the unions. The union goes into the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party votes for laws that allow the unions to stay in business and keep Uber out of there, and you win. We could win this election so easily with these things. It's just astonishing, really. It's just absolutely astonishing. So the final thing I just want to say about this Bernie Sanders socialism thing is this. I was talking to this Uber driver on the way down to the airport yesterday. This actually happened. And I started making some points, and he was from Egypt. He's a very nice guy. And we're talking about a bunch of things. And he said, well, what is it about this capitalism that you like? Why do you hate socialism so much? And I said, because I don't like the kind of equality that socialism talks about. He said, what do you mean? I said, there's two kinds of equality, and they're mutually exclusive. What? It's true. There are two different kinds of equality. There's equality under the law. We all understand what that means. That means just because you're Hillary Clinton, it doesn't mean you get to break the law. That's what equality under the law means. It's not in force here anymore, but that's what it means. But there's two different kinds of equality. There's equality of opportunity and there's equality of results. I'm explaining this to the driver. I'm in favor of equality of opportunity. Let me tell you what that means. That means if we took this entire room full of people and marched over to the University of Oregon and put you on one end zone at the University of Oregon field, equality of opportunity means that everybody lines up on the end zone, nobody gets to start from the 20-yard line, nobody gets to start from the 50, and nobody's held back, nobody's got their arms around you, you don't have to start from the back of the end zone. Equality of opportunity means everybody starts from the starting line, and when I hit that starting button, we go, and we run as fast as we can to the other end zone. This is equality of opportunity. Everybody starts equally. Now, if we had these people in this room right now running a 100-yard dash, what would the result be if they all start from the same place? A lot of heart attacks, yes. Awesome. I'm going to steal that and use it every time from now on. Yes, lots of heart attacks, lots of blown knees. I used to have cartilage, I don't have cartilage anymore. But the answer is pretty simple, right? If all of us ran a race as fast as we could, or as fast as we chose to, everybody would cross that opposing goal line at different times. The fastest people in the room would cross first, the slowest people would cross last. It may be that the fastest person in the room right now may not want to run that fast. Maybe he just wants to smoke doobies out in back of a 7-Eleven for the rest of his life. He's allowed to do that under equality of result. He doesn't have to run as fast as he can only run as fast as he wants to. And everybody's going to cross that finish line at different times, which means with different outcomes. Some people are going to get there first. Equality of opportunity means some people are going to be richer than other people. Because we talk about income inequality all the time, but we never, ever, ever talk about output inequality, and if we did, this issue would go away. Now, what Bernie Sanders and these socialists and these Democrats and these progressives want is they want equality of outcome. They don't care if people start at the same point. They want to make sure everybody crosses at the same time, right? Socialism is equality of outcome. When the race is run, nobody's ahead of anybody else. Nobody has a better car. Nobody made more money. Everybody's about the same. Everybody crosses at the same time. What's the problem with equality of outcome? The problem is that if we're going to all cross the finish line at the same time, everybody has to run at the speed of the slowest runner. Because you cannot run faster than your fastest. Every single person in this room will have to run at the speed of the slowest runner. And every single one of you, except for that person, will have to be artificially held back to make sure that you don't get there faster than the slowest runner. Because that would be unfair. You see? That'd be unfair. You want to know why socialist countries collapse? It's because they run the race at the speed of the slowest runner. And capitalism has made the world rich and free because it allows you not only to run as fast as you can, but as slow as you can. It's up to you. You have the freedom to do what you want. You can do what you want. You want to run fast? Great. So the question you have to ask these young people is, well, it's not fair that this guy has more money. Okay. Is it fair that a guy like Ben Carson, who, while all of you were out smoking dope or partying or having a tremendous, bong party at the frat house, is it fair that while you were getting drunk, so drunk that you couldn't stand, is it fair that he was home studying every single night till 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, getting up at 6 o'clock the next day? Is it fair that he spent $250,000 in loans and went to school for essentially 20 years to become a brain surgeon? Are you telling me it's fair that that man should go home with the same pay as the guy who was smoking dope out back at the 7-Eleven? That's fair to you? That's fair? It's fair that a man that spent 30 years of his life getting good enough to save your daughter if her car hits her on the road gets paid the same amount of money as a guy who goofed off his entire life? That's fair? It's not fair. It's evil. And if you decide to make it so, then guess what you're going to run out of? You're going to run out of brain surgeons before you run out of 7-Eleven clerks, because it's easier to be a 7-Eleven clerk. And why would you go to that trouble if you're going to make the same amount of money you would have made if you just goofed off? So we could do this all day. That's how you win. I'll just give you in closing 2 solutions. Really, it's just simple. If I could do 2, I'd only have to do 2 things to save this country, and I'm not kidding. I would do 2 things. I would first of all, I'd launch a campaign for the 28th Amendment. The 28th Amendment would say the 17th Amendment to the United States Constitution is hereby repealed. Period. Done. What would that do? That would give the states the power to represent the states in Washington, and senators whose original job was to represent the state of Oregon and the state of California would go back and start representing the interests of the state against the federal government. And next time they try to grab land, the people would say, no, that bill's not going to pass. It's not good for Oregon. The people of Oregon may like it. We don't care. The people of Oregon are represented in the House. The state of Oregon says, no. Done. The second thing I would do, people talk about repealing the 16th Amendment and the income tax, but I'll tell you what I would do. It's actually simpler than that. If it were up to me, I would make one thing illegal in this country, and what I would make illegal is payroll withholdings. I'd make it illegal. And I'll tell you why. Because people, everybody, young people, old people, all of us, what do you get paid, sir? Oh, I work in a store, I make $600 a week. Make $600 a week, you go home with $600 a week? No, I go home with $410 a week. Okay. See, what happens is, with this payroll withholding, the federal government is withholding thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, and you never get to touch it. You never get to touch it, you never get to deposit it, you never get to see it. If 4 times a year the citizens of this country had to sit down and write a check for $17,422 paid to the order of the Internal Revenue System, and you had to do that 4 times a year and write a check and take money out of your bank account to send it into the IRS, you had to do that 4 times a year, pay your taxes, same amount of taxes, but if you had to actually send it in, you would look at that money and you would think what you could have bought with that money if you hadn't sent it to the IRS, and all of a sudden people start wanting some value for their money. But we've set it up in such a way that the federal government can take $30,000 from you that you never see, and at the end of the year they give you a $600 rebate, and you think, woohoo, I got a check for $600. And that's how it works. That's how it works. If you made people pay taxes the way they used to pay taxes instead of having it given to you back or taken out without you ever seeing it, all our problems would be over. It's simple. And nobody in Washington has the sense or the courage to say this, but we do. And I'll tell you this in closing, political correctness is not over yet, but it's done. We are past peak political correctness. Everybody's sick of it. Everybody's tired of these crybabies. Everybody's had enough of the safe spaces. Everybody's had enough of these corrupt politicians calling you racist because you dare question them. I'm getting done when I say the last thing I'm going to say. When I say that 5 times, I'm finished. Uber is one example of what the future of this country looks like. Uber is the example of what free markets can do. Drive the price down. My car, Democrats like my car better than they like me. Democrats have a much higher regard for my car than they have of me, because I have an option to buy either the bronze Obama plan, the silver Obama plan, or the gold Obama plan, which cost me 3 times what it used to cost. My doctor's not included, and there's a $5,000 or $6,000 deductible. Do you know what that's like for common people to have a $5,000 deductible on health insurance? It's not insurance anymore. They can't come up with that kind of money. So the Democrats are offering me 3 choices because I'm a living human being. But my car, on the other hand, they love my car because my car has 200 or 300 different kinds of insurance that my car can buy. My car apparently is smart enough and adult enough to say, I want this much deductible, I want this much coverage. I don't want the uninsured motorist, I do want the collision, I want 50,000, not the 100,000 in the comprehensive. And my car apparently is adult enough to make those decisions for itself, but I'm not. I'm not. Free market is driving the cost of auto insurance down. But I don't get that opportunity because they love the cars, but they think nothing about us. We're their servants, we're their subjects. We're going to end it. We're going to end it in November. Thanks for bringing me in. I'd be happy to take any questions.